Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you are having a nice evening if you are in Asia, a nice day if you are anywhere, Europe, Africa, and a nice start of the day if you are in the Americas. So thanks a lot for joining us today in the two last workshops for the chapter of the online course, The Future is Public, the chapter that is looking towards a public path for energy transition. Today, we are joined by Sunghee Oh, who is with the Korean Public Service and Transport Workers Union. Sunghee joined us also a couple of weeks ago in the discussion on health, but today we are discussing very, very interesting case of South Korean trade union struggle for energy democracy. So may I please ask everyone, if possible, to please add the country you're from after your name, and if possible, please turn the cameras on, especially since we are a few people, it would be great to see your faces. So thanks very much again, Sunghee, and over to you to perhaps put together some of the main learnings from this case study that you helped to bring it in the course. Thank you very much.
Hello, comrades. As introduced, I'm Sunghee Oh. I'm International Affairs Director of Korean Public Service and Transport Workers Union. Let me briefly explain more detailed information about my course, my video lecture. So beginning with the first civilian government in 1993 in South Korea, the government began discussing the privatization of public enterprises in the name of globalization. Then in 1997, in return for a bailout during the Asian financial crisis, the IMF imposed neoliberal policies that led to the full privatization of the public sector, especially the power sector. Sorry. The government's plan to split the power sector into generation, transmission, and distribution for sale was halted by a 38-day strike by the Korea Power Plant Industry Union of the KPTU. And strong public opposition to privatization of the power sector. However, the government later saw an opportunity for further privatization and split the single power utility under KEPCO, which is a public corporation, into 6 subsidiaries. The long strike resulted in the dismissal of many workers and legal action that reduced the KPTU KPPIU to a minority union. In addition to splitting KEPCO and introducing a competitive system, the government has implemented a number of policies that favor the interest of independent power producers. As a result, the power generation capacity of the IPPs, independent power producers, continue to increase, while the power generation capacity of the 6 subsidiaries of KEPCO decreased by 37%. Under the pretext of energy transition to respond to the climate crisis, the government is promoting the natural privatization of energy by inducing the gradual closure of coal-fired power plants, which make up the majority of the power plants of the 6 subsidiaries of KEPCO, from the end of 2025, and increasing investment in private renewable energy. The trade union movement in South Korea, despite its long-standing struggle against privatization, has failed to link it to the response to the climate crisis and make it a trade union priority. Meanwhile, the mainstream environmental movement, which has led the response to the climate crisis in South Korea, has been so focused on the urgency of the energy transition that it has failed to criticize government energy policies based on market fundamentalism and privatization. These problems with the mainstream environmental movement, as well as the impact of the rapid climate change, such as COVID-19, on workers' lives and working conditions, led the Korean Democratic Trade Union movement to recognize the need for a worker-led climate justice movement. The convergence of the Democratic Trade Union movement's recognition of the need for climate justice movement and the movement for systemic change, which had already begun among social movements in the late 2010s as a critique of the mainstream environmental movement, led to the formation of a special committee on responding to the climate crisis in 2021 by the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, KCTU, and its affiliates, including my union. So from September 2022, the Korean Democratic Trade Union movement actively participated in the climate justice movement, organizing a climate justice march with alliances with over 30,000 participants and 2 climate justice strikes in 2023 and 2024. In particular, the KPTU has published a research report, Strategies for the Public Sector Trade Union Movement in the Age of Climate Crisis, with its researchers in 2021. On this basis, and recognizing that trade unions should be key actors in building an alternative political and economic system for the realization of climate justice, we adopt as our strategy the expansion and strengthening of public transport policies, the promotion of a publicly owned energy transition, and the strengthening of state responsibility for the creation of decent jobs for workers who lose their jobs in the energy transition. As part of this strategy, we are carrying out a wide range of activities, taking advantage of the fact that we have a wide range of industries organized in our union, including transport, education, power generation, and public services. These include policy papers for a pro-public approach on energy transition, public transport, health and social care, member education, and the Green CBA's movement, legislative campaigns to ensure workers' participation in the climate change regime during the energy transition, and joint research to build alliances. Building on these achievements, we have launched the Public Renewable Energy Campaign with other climate justice and environmental organizations. This year, we will submit a bill to the National Assembly to promote public renewable energy and campaign for its passage in the National Assembly. And the KCT also published a climate justice textbook for workers last month, and will be running various education projects for members throughout this year to build a worker-led climate justice movement. Finally, over the past 2 days until yesterday, irregular workers in my union in the coal-fired power sector went on warning strike to demand a just transition, the first strike ever by a union in the power sector. Their main demand is for the government to stop its privatized renewable energy policy and to secure the jobs of workers who are expected to lose their jobs in the energy transition, such as coal-fired power plants, through a public renewable energy policy. As this is the first strike, many climate justice organizations have shown their solidarities. So we hope we can continue to build our solidarity with other alliances, and we hope to expand our work with other civil society organizations in the climate justice and environmental movement. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks very much for bringing up to the speed and also giving us the latest on the case study. Very interesting. There are many aspects and dimensions of this case study that are interesting, particularly in terms of the trajectory of the union from primarily focusing first on just on jobs and against privatization to actually embracing the environmental issue and becoming part of the environmental justice movement. But let us hear now from the participants what would be their questions and comments about the video lecture that Sunghee has developed for us. So who would like to have a first question? Let me check the chat too. No, not yet. Yes, Ian, yes, please.
One question. How did the union deal with the issue, the paradox of increasing energy efficiency, yet at the same time increasing energy consumption? That has been a challenge in our region because we depend more and more on technology. The demand for energy is actually going up.
Yeah, very good question. Thank you very much. Brian, we're going to come to you later. We take it one by one. So Sunghee, yes, please. We haven't discussed about energy efficiency and energy consumption anymore. We used to discuss about it a lot with environmental movement because, those environmental movement groups kept saying that we need to decrease our energy consumption to protect, environment and, to respond climate changes. But I don't know, but for some reason, we kind of stopped discussing about, energy efficiency and energy consumption anymore. But we have an issue with energy bill, the tariff, because the KEPCO is, public company, so the government kind of regulate the energy, tariff, so that the government can ensure accessibility to, energy for everyone. So we have an issue with energy tariff, but we really, haven't discussed much about energy efficiency and energy consumption. So there's not much say about it. But in terms of energy mix, we have an issue with nuclear power plants in Korea. Because to meet, people's demands for energy, the government need to find other sources to replace, coal-fired power plants. And the former government of South Korea, they try to close those old, coal-fired power plants, replaced by, natural gas power plants as a temporary means. But then this current government has this policy, a pro, nuclear power plant policy. So we have an issue with nuclear power plants. How we see, can we see this, nuclear power plants as, safe and, clean energy or not? Those kind of debates is still going on, but we haven't really talked about, energy efficiency and consumption anymore. Sorry about that. I don't have many knowledge about that. So
yeah. And I think that's the struggles the unions are facing everywhere, and certain debates need to be taking place. So thanks a lot, Ian, for bringing the question up, and to Sunghee for trying to engage with it. Brian, do you want to make your question, please?
Hi, good evening. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Because I'm in data. Okay. Thank you, Sunghee. My question is, why does KEPCO, you said that the renewables are taken up by independent power producers and are being maybe prioritized over KEPCO. So my question is, why does KEPCO not do the transition? Why does it move not move? Why does it not it doesn't move from coal to maybe solar or hydro? So is it an issue of resources maybe, or know-how, or it's just pure public private interest encroaching that the public responsibility of KEPCO? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. It is because of the government policy.
Thank you. Sunghee, we kind of lost you. You were muted by accident. Sorry for that.
Yeah, good.
And wait, yes, now please, if you can start.
So yeah, it is because of the government policy on renewable energy. So the government they want to replace the current coal-fired power plants based energy system into renewable energy based system with these private companies. So the union demands that the government need to fund properly with public funding to make energy transition happen. That's our union and Korean social movement demand for many years, but instead the government chose to invest on private companies to develop renewable energy related technologies because as I explained in my presentation, those coal-fired power plants will be disappeared maybe in next 10 years or 15 years. So the government just want to let that happen without any public investment. But during the period, government will be funding private renewable companies. So the KEPCO already they have MOUs with more than 200 private renewable energy companies. So I think it's part of the government's privatization policy because Korean society, the Korean people, they know the problems of privatization. And as I explained in 2002, when my union went on strike, people supported for our strike to oppose privatization. So governments know that, so they don't want to cause any problem. So the government rather taking detour, hidden way. They are doing they are taking privatization policy, but in a hidden way. So they want to they want to make those coal-fired power plants disappeared naturally without any public investment. Then all those public funding that was supposed to go to KEPCO will be used for private company for energy transition to the renewables. So yeah, that's because it's government policy in favor of private companies' interest.
Thank you, Sunghee. Any other question? I can't see in the chat. While we're waiting for questions, Sunghee, I think one of the, also when reading into the comments that were made under your video lecture on, particularly on this relationship to the environmental justice movements, what do you think are some of the main learnings that we can get from the case of South Korea? Because there you had the union really moving from perhaps no relationship to these movements, to really building strong alliance and working together. What are some of the key learnings of that process in terms of, tensions and contradictions with these movements? One would think that there is lots of learning from both sides in terms of understanding each other and having that dialogue. But what do you think is important to know, and how do you think that has changed the labor movement in your assessment?
Well, the communication is one of the key points, because like I said, when we on a 38 strike in 2002, we were too busy to take care of ourselves, because we became minority union. So we kept saying that we couldn't afford to be involved in climate justice movement. So we only focused on ourselves within the trade union. So we kind of stopped communicating with environmental movement for a while. And during that time, the gap between trade unions and environmental movements gets wider. So I think even though we have different point of view, we have different opinions on the government policy on energy transition, it is important to meet each other and discuss our opinions more often, so that we can close our gaps. So there's one or two major environmental movement organization in South Korea that decided to work with KPTU and other climate justice movement due to our efforts to work with them. So we approached them first, like 2 years ago, and we met them regularly, like every other month or something like that. So we organized joint panel discussion on specific issues. And after 2 years, we were able to close our gaps. So I think communication and working together and try to approach to those environmental movements worked for us. So I think that's the important learning we learned. So we try to, because we just launched our new campaign, public renewable campaign, energy campaign. So we already formed a alliance for the public renewable energy campaign, and so we try to expand those alliance for the campaign. So we plan to organize a series of panel discussion with different environmental movement organizations, so then we recognize our differences, and maybe we could find some common common grounds. So that's what we are doing.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Yes, please, Anne. Yes.
I know you work with environmental organizations and with the Korean Trade Union Confederation. Which other unions besides the health sector unions and the energy sector unions, which are obviously involved in the just transition and the climate justice movement, which other unions supported this, or what's in between the union movement, the discussions? What was the discussions?
Metal Workers Union, the auto, those car companies workers, they are very much interested in evolving with this climate justice movement, because they have been under heavy pressure to change their industry, because they currently they produce, those gas based, cars, but they need to change, to reduce carbon emission. So Metal Workers Union union is very supportive. So we have been working together a lot because those, energy sector workers and healthcare workers and, auto company workers are probably the most, influenced by the, climate, crisis. And also, let's see, aviation sector is also very supportive because, they are the cabin crews and, pilots, they have been experiencing turbulences much more than before. So they recognize, the impact of climate crisis. So aviation sector is also very supportive, and public transport as well, because, they need to also reduce carbon emission. So our public transport sector's unions have been discussing about how we can integrate public transport system based on, like, we have railway workers and metro workers and, bus drivers, and those three areas unions in the KPTU have been discussing to demand the government to set a integrated public transport plan, because for us it's very important to shift road transport to rail transport to reduce carbon emissions. So public transport unions also are very interested and very supportive for this cause. And we also have cable installation workers, those workers who work outside. So they also experienced about the impact of climate crisis, because during summertime, many workers, cable installation workers, they are suffering from heat waves. So they are also very affected by the climate crisis. So they are also very supportive for this climate crisis response, climate justice movement as well. And that's what else?
And to complement, maybe which unions were more reluctant to participate? Maybe some unions were very to complement them both.
But the construction workers also are very supportive. Reluctant. I haven't seen any unions that are reluctant to join this climate justice movement, because maybe until 3 or 4 years ago there will be some few unions that were reluctant to join this movement. But now every union in the KPTU, at least in the KCTU, our umbrella union, recognize the importance of this climate justice movement. So even though maybe there are some members who don't want to join this movement, but at least they don't speak out loud their opinions. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Sunghee. And perhaps to still complement the important question that Ale made, there is a question in the chat box from Sarbasara from India. Sarbasara, why don't you just make the question yourself and ideally put the camera on so we can see you?
Some noise here, so that's why I put in the chat. So
the audio is not very good, Sarbasara. Can you try come closer to the microphone?
yeah, some problem actually. Hello. So I'll request to read the chat. Now I'm audible?
Yes, now you're good.
Okay. Actually, my question is because in India, actually, right now summer is going on. So yesterday the temperature was 50 degree and more, and also frequent cyclones and floods So there is a general consensus among people apart from trade union and other organizations uh, mm, in support of a climate justice movement. So what is the situation in Korea? Because it's another part of the world and we have little knowledge, at least for me. So just I wanted to know what is the situation there and what is the understanding among the general public uh, with regard to climate justice movement.
Yeah, we have experienced very similar, extreme weather events like you have in India. Monsoon seasons started earlier, and we have long summer with very high, temperature, 35, 40 degrees Celsius, lots of rains in a short time. So we have experienced similar, weather, events like you have. And also the public is very much aware of the problems of climate crisis. And we know that, we need to respond quickly to address this climate, crisis situation. Also, some local governments also recognize the situation, so they introduced climate accompanying transport card. It's like 49 euros tickets in Germany. So the government tried to bring more people to use public transport to reduce carbon emission. And we just had a general election in April, but maybe 25% of candidates, they put climate crisis, climate justice related, promises in their manifesto, in their campaigns. So the awareness level in the public is very high, and the politicians know that they need to address climate issue to get more votes. But the thing is, the current government and the president, they are very pro nuclear power. So and also, like I said before, the government's trying to fund private renewable energy companies. So even though those parliament, the member of parliaments pass some law to address climate crisis issue, the president exercise his veto rights. So it's very difficult to address this climate issue in the politics. That's why the trade unions and civil society organizations work together to let people know the importance of public investments on energy systems and so on. So yeah, I think so. Well, I don't know the situation in India. In terms of general public's awareness or support for the climate justice movement, but we have quite good level of awareness, and for the past 3 or 4 years with Climate March, we were able to build stronger solidarity with broad civil society organizations. So let's see, what's going to happen next. And I think politicians also started recognizing, the importance of dealing with climate, crisis issues in the politics.
Yeah, that's great actually. But we also have election going on actually right now. But
It happened in April.
Yeah, it is going on. The result will declared on 4th of June. Yeah, 4th of June.
Okay.
Okay. But climate justice is not in our agenda actually. That's unfortunate.
Okay.
That's unfortunate.
So yeah, so it's very important to put pressure on politicians so that they recognize the issue, and they recognize the importance of having policies to deal with climate crisis. So we try to communicate with politicians as many as we can in various channels. So that's also very important to bring politicians to the climate justice movement based on our experiences.
Thank you, Sunghee. Brian, did I see you raise your hand at some point?
Yeah, if
Yes,
it's
please.
okay. I would like. Okay, just a quick question. Sunghee, you have described in detail the issues of generation of power in Korea. How about transmission and distribution? So what are the issues in maybe privatization, and what are the struggles of the workers groups in those sectors? Thank you.
So transmission, distribution are still belong to KEPCO. It's monopolized by KEPCO, so it's kind of safe. But then the government's attempt to open this electricity market to the private sector. So that's the issue we are dealing with now. So because like I said before, the government regulate electricity tariff. So KEPCO kind of is suffering from that. It's good that to provide electricity to all people, because even though they bought electricity with higher price, they cannot raise the electricity tariff because of the government regulation. But then so with this situation, the debt of KEPCO has kept increasing every year. So the government's making this argument. Okay, KEPCO, you have this much debt, so you're very inefficient. So we need to bring private company into electricity market. That's government logic. So we have an issue with that because the government tried to open this electricity market to the private sector, but it hasn't happened. It happened partially, but it hasn't happened fully. So we are trying to stop doing that. Stop the government bring private to open the market to the private sector, but it's still kind of safe. But yeah, that's the situation now.
Thanks, Sunghee. And connected to that, do you already see what the problems could be with this kind of decentralization, that you see so many operators, private operators trying to produce energy? So what does it do to the system? Are there already some analysis of what could be the problem if you go for this multiplicity of providers of energy, which seems to be the case in other countries, that they are saying, let it be produced in a decentralized ways and, small community run. So what does it do to the system? What are the learnings from the case of South Korea?
Well, decentralization hasn't actually happened in South Korea. But then with this discussion with renewable energy, there are some, cooperatives and some, movement groups saying that we need to bring more cooperatives into the renewable energy. But I don't think that's a sustainable system because, when you look at the cases in Europe, decentralized, renewable energy system cannot be maintained without government funding. So we don't think that's a good way to do. So so that's why my union and other climate justice movement group calling on the government that the government should integrate these 6 subsidiaries of KEPCO. So we want the government to make these 6 subsidiaries into one, integrated public power company again. So then, government maybe they can promote more integrated and, pro-public energy policy in the process of energy transition. So this is the model we are talking about. So here's like one integrated public company in the center. Maybe we can have 5 or 6 companies under this one integrated company, based on the resource of energy, like solar or hydrogen or so with this integrated public company, we can pursue, more systematic pro-public renewable energy, because government kept using this energy transition as an opportunity for privatization. So that's our model we are looking for.
Yeah, thank you. And I think so far you have really spoken about the main challenge that comes from energy transition. That seems to be the government itself, with its plans of privatization and so on. So there is a question from Etito, do you want to read your own question about the challenges of energy transition, or shall I? I'm not entirely sure how to. But basically, if she doesn't take the floor, she's asking more generally, what are the key challenges facing the case of South Korea when it comes to the energy transition?
Because, currently our energy consumption is heavily relied on coal-fired power plants. So maybe it's related to energy consumption somehow. But anyway, government need to, keep the energy capacity to meet, people's needs for electricity. So there's an issue with should we bring more nuclear power plants to meet people's demands for energy, or should we bring other renewable energy faster to meet these people's demands? But then, like I said, the government trying to use this energy transition period as an opportunity for privatization. So that's the most challenging situation for us, because we have been struggling to stop privatization of electricity sector. But then with this energy transition and with support by the mainstream environmental movement, government kept saying that if we need to reach carbon neutral society by 2030 or 2050, we need to, close down all those coal-fired power plants. Then, what energy source we could use. So we can bring, those private, renewable energies, or, we need to build more, nuclear, power plants. So the thing is, government is not really, taking this energy transition seriously enough. They only, look at this energy transition as a means for privatization. So that's the most challenging things we are facing now.
Yeah, thank you. Any other question? We have Sunghee for about 10 more minutes together. So if you want to ask something. While we wait for another question, Sunghee, if there is one, can you tell us something? I mean, the repression that the South Korean trade unions have gone through is just really, I mean, so significant in terms of you mentioned the case of the strike against privatization. That was very brutal, what happened to workers, and then there are so many other cases, but what do you see in terms of kind of a response to the government? Do you think it's ready to still go with the same level of repression, is ready to exercise the same level of violence if need arises? And if you can tell us also something about how do the unions see this struggle also as part of the broader struggle for democracy in the country, the struggle for just transition? So are this connection being made in between previous struggles and these struggles, just for us to get a bit of a better sense of the Korean labor movement response more generally, but also government response in terms of its repressive measures?
Government is getting smarter. They don't seem very violent when you look from outside, because before until maybe 10 years ago, it was very obvious that government repressed trade union movement. But now, we have generational change in the trade union movement. So there's some young members in their 20s and 30s. They didn't have any social movement experience in their university years. So they're very individualized, and for over 2 decades, the conservative media and the conservative political party, they kept saying that these organized workers in the trade union movement, they are the privileged one. Their job security is guaranteed, and they have higher wages. They have better pension, and they have better benefits. So they kind of, those conservative media and political parties gave people the image of like devil. When people think about trade union movement, people especially younger generation, because the labor market, the situation of the labor market is getting worse and worse as years go by. So these younger generation in their 20s, they think these organized workers in the trade unions are their enemies sometimes. So government using this younger generation sentiment against the trade union, the traditional trade unions. So sometimes those consulting companies, they help those younger generation to create their own pro-employer trade union in the workplace. So the government and employers are using this new trade union to bring conflict between workers. So that's the tactic the government and the employers are using now. So when the public, even though the government, the police offices and national security services, they raided trade union offices last year. people didn't think that's unfair, because government always have these reasons to attack trade union movement. And I think because of the government propaganda, anti-union propaganda, we are kind of losing people's support uh, compared to like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So we have lots of discussion going on in the trade union movement, how we can, bring back, people's support and, again. So, but then government is using now the administrative measures to attack trade unions. Like trade unions, we have our own audit system, but then government they revise regulations and related laws that trade unions should disclose our financial report every year, things like this. And also we can have full-time union officers for trade union activities, but according to the Korean law, the number of full-time trade union officers are regulated by the law based on membership. Maybe one union officer per 1,000 members, something like that. But then, in the field, workplace level, trade unions normally negotiate with their own employer how many full-time union officers they could have. But then last year, the government sent labor inspectors to each workplace to review how this, full-time union officer system worked in the workplace. And the government said the collective bargaining agreements on full-time union officers between employers and employee invalid. So now we have an issue with these full-time union officers, things like that.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a more already made legal, the kind of repression through this other.
Yeah, true.
Perhaps signals also for what's going to happen in Argentina, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. And I was also going to say that the KCTU is very famous in Argentina because of its strikes. So your question was something I wanted to ask too about the direct actions that you are taking to support this movement.
Yeah, thank you. So Basara, do you want to make a final question?
This is not related, but it's a general question with regard to trade unions. Actually, few years back, there was a company from South Korea, POSCO. So they tried hard to set up their company in Odisha, my home state. So there was a lot of people's resistance. Many people were put in jail by the local government. So how trade union in your country, they look at such kind of expansionist corporates they are operating in other countries? What is your perception? Because these companies are also highly polluting.
Yeah, that's another issue. In POSCO, there are 2 or 3 different unions, and one is a branch of Korean Metal Workers Union in the KCTU, but the other unions are more like pro-employer, pro-government union or yellow union. And so the Democratic Union is minority union. Their members are mostly irregular workers in POSCO. So the Metal Workers Union wanted to deal with the issue you just pointed out, but then the Democratic Union is too weak because their members are not regular workers and their union is minority union. But we are aware of the issue you just mentioned, so we try to that also to be our priorities. But the climate justice issue has been in the trade union priorities for just 2 or 3 years. It's like we are in the still baby step stage. So we are aware of the issue with the Korean companies, what the Korean companies doing in other countries. But maybe lack of capacity, or it takes some time to deal with the issue you just mentioned in the Korean trade union movement. But I will pass your comment on to my colleagues in the Metal Workers Union, and if let's see what Metal Workers Union can do about it, because POSCO is not our unions. But I will pass your comment on my colleagues in the Metal Workers Union, so that they could find a way to deal with the issue you mentioned. But like 2 years ago, when we organized International Trade Union Forum on Climate Crisis, actually we invited 20 or 30 people from different countries. And at that time, we went to the head office of POSCO to protest, about the climate, issues, pollutings and pollutions and everything. So we try to deal with the issue with POSCO, but it hasn't achieved a lot because like I said, we are minority union, and the labor relations in South Korea is very unfair. Usually those big companies like POSCO or Samsung or Hyundai, they never listen to trade unions, but we are trying. So
Yeah.
let's see what we could do in the future.
Thank you. But it was stopped actually. They left the state. It was stopped actually. They left actually.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And if we can, as a way of wrapping up too, Sunghee, can you tell us just a few words about how important was this important research report that you mentioned in your video lecture, the strategies for public sector trade union movements in the era of the climate crisis, in terms of directing the strategies and actions of the trade unions? So how was it put together, this report, and how important was in terms of informing the strategies and actions?
Because that was the very first report, dealing with climate issue in the trade union movement. So before this report came out, KPTU never, talked about climate issues when we discuss our work plan, because we usually have our convention every year to decide each year's work plan. But then with this report, we were able to our division in the KPTU. We have different divisions, sectoral division in the KPTU. Sometimes they are too separated, too individualized, because it's very difficult to find common ground, even they are all belong to the KPTU. But with this climate crisis related issues, climate justice issue, we were able to bring those different sectoral divisions into one with the response to climate crisis and climate justice. So with this report, we were able to develop, our work plan for each sectoral division, as well as KPTU itself as one. So it was kind of a good example for other, trade unions in Korea as well. So it's like cornerstone, report for us.
Thank you.
And with your research, we were able to reach out other, researchers in academia. So it helped us to build a network with researchers and people in academia.
Thank you, Sunghee. Very, very interesting. And as people in the chat are also putting it, we learned a lot about what's happening in South Korea, in particular in their struggle for environmental justice. Very inspiring story. Thanks, everyone, for the participation and the questions. And in less than 30 minutes, we are starting our next workshop.